Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for coming. Hope everyone's having a first good day at Hack For It. I appreciate all of you coming to my talk and not going to the yoga and sound healing bath at this exact hour. I myself was tempted to go to that and miss my own. No, I'm just kidding. So today we're going to talk about what I'm calling From Feeds to Focus, the future of digital connection. It's a talk all about an interesting cycle we're seeing in tech, specifically as it relates to our social lives online. Now, tech trends, like pretty much everything else, goes in cycles. If you take the music industry, for example, news broke in 2023 that vinyl is making a comeback, selling other physical formats of media. The music industry had moved on to digital, CDs, MP3s, of course, streaming era. But now listeners are coming back to vinyl, where they're craving that warm sound, that analog vibe again. And the same thing is happening online, where people are craving spaces that feel human again. That's what today's talk is about, how we've come full circle in how we connect online, and what that means for the future of digital community. So I've lived through a few of these cycles myself. I started as a new media artist, then turned into a game developer where I worked on some early Facebook games. I'm now a product manager working on the product GroupMe, which is a consumer messaging app owned by Microsoft, and really one of the first apps purely built for digital community. My career journey has always been about exploring the edges, examining where tech and culture collide. And as someone who's focused on building products, this has given me a perspective that building great products isn't just about solving problems. It's also about responding to cultural shifts and giving people new ways to belong. So here's what we'll cover today. First, we'll take a quick walk through the history of online connection and how we got to today's very feed-driven landscape. Then we'll dig into what's broken with big social platforms and why users are looking for something different. Next, we'll walk through how the tides are turning, shifting to smaller niche communities where chat messaging really plays a heavy role, and the factors that we see shaping tighter connections. Then I'll share how the product I work on, GroupMe, fits into this shift with real examples of the kinds of communities we see thriving on our platform. So my hope is by examining these topics, I'll give you some insights into where online communities are headed and what we can build next. But before we get into the history lesson, I'd like to invite you all in a little game. I brought some totes, some GroupMe totes. So I have some swag prizes for those who can correctly name that failed network. So I have scoured the internet archives for some failed social products. I'm going to flash just the UI without the logo or any of the defining characteristics of the UI. And first to raise their hand and guess what that product was will score the tote. So we'll start with this one. Anyone recognize this old UI? I'm digging it deep. There may not be any takers on this one. Wow. All right, too indie for this crowd. What about if these additional details, it had to do with bookmarking? Yes, sir?
I think it might be dig.
Ooh, very close.
Delicious.
Delicious! Thank you. You give me hope, sir. Great, so Delicious was an early social site all about sharing bookmarks with one another. It launched in 2003, was acquired by Yahoo in 2007, and died shortly thereafter due to Yahoo's poor stewardship. But it was a great platform. You could aggregate a ton of links, share it with like minds, and really kind of set forth some of the early mechanisms for successful social products in terms of sharing effectively. Next up, okay. This one? Yes?
I think it's MySpace.
Oh, no! I'm going to get, what'd you guess last time?
Dig.
Dig, yes, it's Dig. I had to give it to you. Yeah. Yeah, so this is Dig. Dig was really kind of the first Reddit. It was sharing, let me go back. It was sharing news articles and links in a public forum for people to upvote their favorites, forcing the most popular news of the day to the top. Dig, interestingly, was the first to really innovate around the like mechanism. The like button really started on Dig, and Mark Zuckerberg actually went to have a talk with Kevin Rose, the founder of Dig, to understand how that mechanism works, and obviously brought it to Facebook to much greater success. Okay, next up. Anyone recognize this mobile UI? Any takers?
Foursquare.
Yes.
Foursquare.
Yep. Nicely done. This was Foursquare. Launched in 2009 and live until, I'd say, 2014 when it splintered into the Foursquare City Guide and the Swarm app, which was purely for check-ins. Foursquare really innovated around the location check-in as the mechanism for social sharing. That was the social artifact that drove the network. And it was really a delightful experience in its day. It had this cool badge-style mechanic, really one of the first to have badging and gamification in the experience. And you could become the mayor of a location if you were the most frequent to check in that place. And actually, I think they just officially folded the Foursquare app, or the Foursquare City Guide, just last year. So had an interesting trajectory. All right, last one in this game. Anyone recognize this UI? Vine. Yes. Do you want 2 tote bags, or do you want to donate your tote bag? Okay, we'll have a separate game at the end for the spare tote bag. Yes, Vine. Launched in 2013 by Twitter, actually, as the incubation product inside of Twitter. Was only live until 2016 when TikTok kind of ate its lunch in terms of a video sharing platform. But Vine was the first to really innovate with a feed of video sharing. It actually had an interesting constraint where you would just share 6-second video loops. And as a result, had a very charming, very avidly engaged community that came behind it. Encourage everyone to search the archives for video loops. There was a lot of really fun videos in its day. All right, so now carrying forward, it's time for the history lesson. Before we dive into where social tech is heading, let's first take a look back at where it's been. It's always fascinating that what feels like new today is often just a reimagining of what came before. So let's take a walk through. Starting with the 80s, the internet wasn't born as a mass medium, of course. It began as a collection of intimate communities. In the 80s, you had these bulletin board systems and Usenet groups. Those were the original online hangouts. These weren't flashy platforms. They were text-based. Users gathered around specific interests, and getting access was actually quite hard. You had to have a lot of technical know-how to get access to these forums. So those who participated were very intentional about their involvement. And what's fascinating about these early communities is how the constraints of the technology actually helped foster real deeper connections in these networks. So when access required actually dialing in through your landline, you weren't casually browsing here. You were there with a purpose. These niche communities thrived on shared context, whether you were discussing programming on a BBS or sci-fi on a Usenet group. Everyone understood the cultural references. All your friends got the inside jokes, and you knew you belonged in that club. Now, stepping ahead to the mid-90s, we saw community spaces evolve into more immediate connections with the rise of real-time chat that lowered the technical barrier to access. Does anyone remember this sound? Let me play it one more time. Oh, sound is buggy. There it was. The uh-oh sound from ICQ Messenger, or also AOL Instant Messenger, had that door creaking sound. Now, these platforms introduced us to mechanisms like status indicators, away messages, and those early emoticons that were just a series of punctuation. They created a sense of presence, digital presence. You knew your friends were online, when they were away, and when they were typing. This era was about being in the moment with your friends or hanging out in chat rooms, not performing for an audience or competing for attention. All of this led to a more intimate experience. Then came the emergence of mobile messaging in the late 90s to early 2000s. As mobile phones became ubiquitous, SMS messaging took over, bringing the experience of chat off of our desktops and into the real world. Who here remembers counting characters to fit within a 160 character limit? Or typing ABC on a phone keypad? Messages in this era were not free and unlimited, so people had to be thoughtful about what and how much they said. This era marks an important transition where communication becomes truly portable, but still primarily served actual relationships rather than building a follower base. Then in the 2000s, social networks took center stage. Digital spaces that initially mirrored our real-life connections evolved into something fundamentally different. We had early platforms like Friendster and MySpace. Those were fundamentally about connecting with people you knew. Friendster, its very name revealed its purpose. It was like a friend radar that mapped your existing social connections. And who could forget the chaos of MySpace profiles? The garish backgrounds and auto-playing songs were literally like teenage bedrooms made digital. Personal spaces you invited your friends into, not content optimized for strangers. The real breakout happened, of course, with what was originally called the Facebook, which began at Harvard as a digital version of the printed Facebooks that helped freshmen recognize each other's faces on campus. Students, to get access, they had to verify their .edu email address. And interestingly, that constraint was actually a feature that maintained context and trust in the network. You knew exactly who was seeing your beer pong photos because they belonged to the same physical community as you. Now, Twitter started with a simple prompt. You came to the interface and it asked, "What are you doing?" It assumed you were talking to friends who cared about your mundane status updates. There was a 140 character limit that wasn't designed initially for hot takes. It was just an inherited constraint from SMS. Now, this era's transformation was subtle but profound. Your social graph became digitized, and the prevailing behavior changed from hopping from one friend's profile to the next to passively consuming a feed of updates. In this era, connection became secondary to distribution, conversation gave way to broadcast, and relationships yielded to reach. This shift accelerated in the 2010s as feed algorithms start to take control of what we see. What was the chronological timeline that showed posts in the orders that they were shared gave way to algorithmic feeds optimized for engagement. Take the evolution from Vine to TikTok. Vine was fundamentally user-led. You saw content from the people you followed, versus TikTok being algorithm-led, and an AI deciding what you might like, regardless of who created it. We also saw new media formats explode in this era. Stories, reels, lenses all came about. And short-form vertical video, it didn't just change what we watched, it rewired our attention spans. The always-on nature of these platforms created FOMO that kept us constantly checking in. Creators adapted to these formats, and authentic moments gave way to performative content specifically designed to game the algorithm. Now, this shift has fundamentally changed our relationship with social platforms. We've lost the agency to curate our own experience, as algorithms increasingly define the content we scroll and the connections we follow. And we're seeing that big social has really lost its course. there's a fundamental disconnect between what the social platforms promise and what they deliver. The dream at the outset was about connecting with friends and family, creating meaningful relationships online. But the reality has become something very different. According to this recent research from The Verge, 86% of people say that they see big social media platforms are ruling the internet and they're evolving in ways that they don't appreciate. Also, 60% of those surveyed had very negative things to say, like they felt like being a number in a giant algo machine, in a place of never-ending product placements that is a simulation but with ads in it. And perhaps worst of all, that they just feel like a data point waiting to be sold. Now, these aren't just casual complaints. They represent a profound alienation from platforms that were supposed to bring us closer together. What started as tools for human connection have transformed into attention marketplaces dominated by brands and influencers. Of course, the platforms themselves aren't entirely to blame. They're just operating against market incentives, right? But somewhere along the way, the original mission of connecting people got lost in the pursuit of engagements and ad revenue. When 60% of your users describe your product negatively and feel like they're waiting to be sold, there's a serious misalignment between what people want and what they're getting. This shift has also created an unhealthy dynamic where users are constantly competing for attention, with especially negative consequences for younger users. You can see here in the New York City Special Report on Social Media and Mental Health that we see 3 times the rates of depression and anxiety amongst teenagers who use social media versus those who do not. And concurrently, we're seeing, according to the Pew Research Center, unprecedented levels of use of social media, with nearly half of teenagers reporting being online almost constantly versus only 24% a decade before. Now think about that for a moment. We have platforms designed for maximum engagement, a teen population that's nearly universally connected, and clear correlations with serious mental health issues. This isn't connection, it's competition disguised as community, and the consequences are measurable and serious. The algorithms that power these social platforms have fundamentally changed how we experience content online, explaining much of our collective exhaustion. Modern recommendation systems, understanding how they work, they track countless signals, from dwell time on a screen to follow behaviors. And those signals create a powerful magnetic pull on our attention. Now, this creates a phenomenon that researchers call algorithmic confounding, which is basically a fancy term for a feedback loop where these systems shape user behavior rather than merely reflecting it. So our preferences become intertwined with algorithmic suggestions until we can no longer distinguish between what we like and what's been served to us. Another troubling phenomenon is attentional fragmentation. This is where our ability to maintain sustained focus deteriorates. Content feeds served by algorithms scatter our focus across too many stimuli simultaneously. So it's no wonder we're exhausted. The magnetic pull of algorithms transforms how our brains process information, confounding our preferences and fragmenting our ability to focus. We're not just consuming content, we're being consumed by systems designed to maximize engagement to the detriment of our well-being. And these algorithms are increasingly taking us places we never asked to go. Take, for instance, just this January, Meta announced their big initiative of more speech and fewer mistakes, with Mark Zuckerberg declaring they're going to scale back on human moderation on their platforms and leverage AI solutions instead. So let's check on how that's working out, Zuck. Well, barely a month later, Instagram's algorithm flipped out, transforming users' feeds into never-ending scrolls of murder, gore, and violence. One user reported seeing around 70 murders, 100 accidents, and around 115 violence videos in a single day. Now, this spectacular faceplant reveals the fundamental truth. These platforms are driven by AI systems that prioritize engagement over well-being, and they're growing increasingly unpredictable, even to their creators. The result? Feeds that feel increasingly hostile and impossible for users to control, the exact opposite of the connection these platforms originally promised. And then AI is also creating a new problem of content authenticity. We see platforms being flooded with AI-generated content that it is increasingly difficult to distinguish from human-generated content. Pinterest saw this to the extent that they had to create a labeling system aimed at containing the flood of AI-generated images. And then on the other side, we have Meta deploying AI avatars across their properties to try and engage users with these artificial characters. So you could chat with an AI version of Snoop Dogg or an AI version of Tom Brady. And the feedback is users is they're just not having it. These are not authentic experiences that they're craving. Now, this raises a profound question. So in a world where both the content and the curation are increasingly artificial, where do we find genuine human connection? And the answer, it seems, is increasingly nowhere. As artificial interactions proliferate online, the fidelity of human connection is getting weaker. Despite being more connected than ever, we're experiencing unprecedented levels of loneliness. In a recent Verge survey, 52% of respondents said they feel less connected than they did 5 years ago. Most people said that the way we form connections has fundamentally changed. This isn't just sad, it's a public health crisis. In 2023, it got to the extent that the US Surgeon General labeled loneliness an epidemic with health effects comparable to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Yet, I think we're seeing a pendulum swing with respect to digital connection that I hope may offer some perspective, if not comfort. More and more, we see users seeking out smaller places to connect. We see activity shifting from the public town square back to the living room. Now, throughout the history of technology, we've seen this pattern repeat itself. Technologies will expand outward, reaching for maximum scale and audience, until they hit a point where their scale becomes their very weakness. Then inevitably a correction will happen, a return, I hope, to where healthy connections can be made. So what exactly does digital intimacy look like in 2025? It's not about disconnecting from tech, it's about connecting more intentionally. There's this fascinating research, again from The Verge, that reveals exactly what we're seeing in the real world, where people are juggling, on average, about 7 different groups in their lives. 2 of those groups are entirely online. 2 are their friends in the real world or connections in the real world. And then 3 of those groups are a hybrid, bridging the online and physical contexts. Now, when people were asked what makes them feel most connected to others, they answered that small group interactions, like connecting with friends and family in person, direct messaging chats, or participating in small online communities were the ones they found most fulfilling. So again, what we're witnessing isn't a rejection of digital connection. It's a refinement of it. People are becoming more intentional about where and how they invest their social energy online. We're seeing this shift across platforms. Discord servers built around specific interests or communities, subreddits on every aspect of daily life. With GroupMe, we see groups that typically fall in the range of 10 to 40 members and discussing all kinds of topics. Even Instagram is veering this direction with their close friends feature that they're experimenting with, which lets you share stories just with your inner circle. So whether it's K-pop or venting about your relationship struggles or your random hobby, there's a niche group out there with like minds to chat about those interests. Smaller communities enable deeper connection. Ideally, communities should be no more than 200 people. And what's fascinating here is none of these platforms are bringing new technologies to bear. They're just being used with new intentions in a new societal context. Now, across these various group types, we're seeing 4 key characteristics emerge. First, shared context is very powerful. When people have common experiences or backgrounds, say they're students at the same university, fans of the same obscure band, or neighbors in the same apartment complex, that shared context is a foundation to build upon. Second, greater trust and reliability. If you're in a group where the mods or group creators have effective tools to foster community, to moderate the content, then they're able to foster an environment where members feel secure, sharing and making meaningful connections. Third, there should be lower pressure to perform. There's no follower count in a group chat. There's no algorithm to please. So this removes the constant pressure to create content and lets you just talk. And finally, more ephemeral connection can help create connection in the group. Not everything needs to be archived forever. So when you're not worried about screenshots going viral or strangers judging your comments, it helps. Now let's talk about authenticity for a moment. If you've been following social media over the past decade, you'll see having emerged what I call the authenticity arms race. Every few years, a new platform has come out claiming to be the antidote to the fakeness of existing platforms. It started with Instagram positioning itself as more authentic than Facebook's curated profiles. Then Snapchat came out claiming itself as the authentic alternative to Instagram's polished grids. Then BeReal is out saying that it's the anti-Instagram, promising real life without filters. The pattern's almost comical at this point. Platform launches with claims of authenticity, the platform grows to the point that it becomes inauthentic, and then a new platform comes along claiming to solve the problem. Rinse and repeat. Now it's at this stage where I need to acknowledge something important. Standing here as the GroupMe product manager, I could be seen as just another contestant in this line vying to be the newly authentic platform. That irony isn't lost on me, shouldn't be lost on this very intelligent audience either. But here's the difference, and I believe this sincerely. GroupMe was never built to be a performance space. From day one, we've been a utility, not a stage. We don't have public profiles, follower accounts, or attention-maximizing algorithms. We don't benefit when you perform for an audience. Our core use case has always been about practical communication between people who actually know each other. The hardest product decisions to make aren't about what features to add to your product. They're which to deliberately exclude. At GroupMe, we've consistently rejected ideas geared towards amping engagement metrics at the expense of genuine communication. Now, building for authenticity means constantly questioning whether each feature you build serves genuine communication or performative behavior. So it's a product philosophy that guides our decisions, not a marketing claim we make. Now, that aim to deliver practical communication utility goes all the way back to GroupMe's origins. When it launched in 2010, it was actually before iMessage even existed. Back then, the digital landscape was dominated by one-to-one texting or broadcast social media. And the main motivation for GroupMe's founders, Jared and Steve, was actually to solve how hard it was to plan events over email. It's crazy to think that GroupMe was founded in 2010, back towards the early days of the initial social revolution. And it kept evolving as just a group chat app, while other social tech companies veered off into the algorithm era. Now, GroupMe's story is uniquely intertwined with the shift toward digital intimacy. GroupMe created something in between, a space where small groups of people could communicate privately without sharing their phone numbers. This creates what I see as like a close, loose ties dynamic that was revolutionary at the time. You could be in a meaningful group conversation without actually being close enough to exchange personal contact information. You can think about cases like the dorm floor group chat or the intramural soccer team. Those are relationships that really matter, but they're different from your immediate inner circle. Here's a case study that really illustrates that approach. So we launched on GroupMe this feature for event groups just recently. And when we designed it, we weren't thinking about creating shareable moments or FOMO-inducing content. Instead, we asked, how can we solve the real coordination problems people face when getting together? That led to fundamentally different design choices than if we'd focused on discoverability or virality. Now with event groups, we give users a bridge between their online and real-world contexts to help foster connections. It's not just another thread. It's a fully featured GroupMe chat with all the tools you need to plan an event. You have RSVPs, polls, and photo sharing that enables you to share photos before, during, and after the party. Now, this is the essence of the physical-digital bridge, technology that doesn't replace real connection, but amplifies it. In a world where there's so many digital tools that end up keeping us glued to our screens, we're trying to build features designed to get you off your phone and with your people. Another example of how we're fostering niche communities is GroupMe Campus. So here we've built an exclusive experience for verified students to unlock events and groups specific to their school. As a result, GroupMe is now at over 70% of US colleges having active campus groups. It's also another example of old tech becoming new again. If you recall, Facebook started being exclusive to college networks and then scaled beyond. And we're following a similar model. So at GroupMe, we're tapping into college networks with more focus to unlock communities built on the shared context of daily campus life. And it's working. We see really amazing communities popping up across the country, including ride-sharing groups where people help each other get home after college nights out. There's also really fun groups popping up on all kinds of specific use cases, like one of my favorites, the Sunset Adventures group at University of Georgia, which is just where people share at the end of the day amazing shots of sunsets, creates a very specific community, very ambient feel of connection with others around you. And then finally, across schools, we see a common type of group, these free food groups popping up on campuses where whenever there's leftover bagels or pizza after a student club event, people will share for others to come pick up that free food. So people join these communities for news about the food, and they stick around to swap advice and campus memes. Beyond college, we also see GroupMe scaling out from that core demographic to other adjacent use cases. So we see users going on to create sports clubs and groups, running club groups, professional and alumni networking groups. It's used at music festivals. We need to start it here at Treefort. Pop culture groups. The full gamut of niche communities and interests are spawning today on GroupMe. Now, a few takeaways. First, we're seeing real nostalgia for the early internet's close-knit vibe. Those BBS forums and chat rooms weren't just primitive. They offered communities where people really knew each other and connections felt meaningful. Second, feed-driven social feels more like a tax than fun today. It taxes our attention and well-being. What began as connection has become an endless stream optimized for engagement metrics and not human relationships. Third, as we shared context and trust are true foundations of belonging online. So in smaller spaces like GroupMe communities or Discord servers, people unite around specific interests or relationships that create conditions for authenticity. And finally, we're seeing this shift online from broadcast to conversation. The mega platforms have trained us to broadcast to audiences rather than converse with friends. And the platforms that understand the shift back to conversation will be the ones that I believe will see more engagement ahead. But what about AI? Of course, that is the elephant in the room, in every room today, so I'd be remiss not to share my thoughts. Obviously, it's a space that's evolving very rapidly, but here's my perspective from working in the industry. First, all the big platforms are really in an experimental stage where they have a capability that's seeking a solution. They're deploying it, often to failed ends, but they're going to keep trying and putting it across all their services. Second, users are really wary of AI, skeptical of how it's being deployed, and especially nervous when it's adjacent to private information like their chat messages. Then there's this identity tension about what part and relationship we should have with AI. Is it a human-like friend with a really warm personality that gets to know you very closely, or should it be more of a utility agent that helps you achieve tasks? And then lastly, the real opportunity, as I see it, is to unlock magic via AI from the collective context. When this comes to the group chat context, we can imagine scenarios where summarization is really helpful, or you can celebrate shared moments, relieve users of the need to really scroll back through a long history in the chat, or help people coordinate around things like times to meet or calendars. Now at GroupMe, we are exploring what the most thoughtful, trusted AI capabilities we should bring to the community in a way that enhances human connection and doesn't supplant it. So stay tuned for what's coming there. And with that, we'll end. Thanks all. Take any questions. Yes.
It feels like a lot of what went wrong with Facebook and social media like that was carrots and sticks. Because it's ad-driven, they need to have as many eyeballs on it for as long as possible. How does this app make money? And if it's ad-driven, how can you make sure that the carrots and sticks are right? That it doesn't just become slop?
Yes, great question. So you're totally right that many of the major scaled platforms, Facebook, Instagram, even Twitter, and now X, really thrived and are monetized via ad revenue, right? GroupMe today, being owned by Microsoft doesn't really have the ad strength and is not core to its business. So monetization via ads is not our strategy. We are really a vehicle for Microsoft to reach a Gen Z demographic that it can establish a brand pull over the course of a longer lifetime value, with customers pulling them into eventually the Microsoft 365 ecosystem, the Copilot ecosystem. So GroupMe is blessed in that sense that we don't have to monetize via ads or other such vehicles as a result of having that tie into the Microsoft ecosystem. Great question. Anyone else?
I have one. So just based kind of on your philosophy and just talking about, whose responsibility it is in like an attention economy focused app, at what point do you feel like it is the responsibility of the company and the employees and the developers designing that to take accountability for the tech that they create and the negative impacts that it has on its consumers and users?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think you're highlighting, there's obviously an element of diffused accountability amongst the large teams who are building these products. I mean, Facebook now, Meta, is thousands upon thousands of employees. Many have moved on and have declared publicly their regret for enabling some of the negative repercussions, misinformation, spoiled elections and such that came about due to Facebook's rise. But it's a very hard problem in any society or any scenario where there's the opportunity for diffused accountability. So no good answers there. I think ultimately, as you see, there's more regulation coming to the fore, especially in the EU, where social media is being regulated more closely. And obviously, big companies are trying to lobby against that. You see more and more PSA-style advertising, especially from Instagram. They're advertising about their teen accounts, trying to reassure parents and trying to stave off the coming need for regulation. But it will be this push and pull between regulatory forces and private entities to really make sure that more healthy platforms are built. And also, it's ultimately up to users to vote with their attention by pulling their attention elsewhere. I think as a result of that already happening, you see like Instagram reacting with its close friends feature. They're realizing, okay, we can't push in so many ads, we can't make the algorithm so hungry that we're alienating users. So it has to come to its own equilibrium, I think. Yeah.
No farther.
Right, they're always going to push. You have the internal revenue growth teams vying against the safety and health teams. Right.
Back off.
Yeah, great question though. No easy answer. Yes.
It feels like Internet 2.0, everyone had their own domain and their own space, their own website. Internet 3.0, everyone moved on to platforms, like, again, Facebook. Do you see the future of the internet being us fragmenting back into individual websites, or do you think conglomerates are just going to keep on owning platforms and we exist on those platforms?
Yeah, it's a great question about whether the future holds more privately held walled gardens or more individually owned web properties. I think it'll be a mixture of both, ultimately. When I spoke to the pendulum swing, I think we're at the very early stage of that. Obviously, the pendulum hasn't swung back to really small entities, but we're starting to see a trickle of that. With things like the Fediverse, like Blue Sky, those kinds of applications that allow you to migrate your data, there will be more of that, but I think it'll be very much led by early tech adopters, less the mainstream, and over time, hopefully, those kinds of Fediverse concepts become more mainstream. You also have, there's a great book that just came out by Chris Dixon, Read, Write, Own, which he explores kind of the coming era, especially with the shift to blockchain, enabling more people to own their own properties. So I think that will definitely become more the norm. Also with the forces of AI, where people are going to want to maintain the context of their own data and choose when to share it with AI for a proper value exchange, but not compromise too much of their private information. So I definitely see the next 5-10 years more kind of the old, I own my own domain, I have my own blog, I have my own space, and I choose when and how to share it scenarios emerging.
What was the name of that book?
Oh, Read, Write, Own by Chris Dixon. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Sorry, I just lost my train of thought.
No worries.
Go on, I'll think of
We
it.
can come back. We can look
5
back.
seconds.
Yes.
So anytime you have a great community, it's going to grow because more people want in on it.
Oh.
You showed a few screenshots of the events spaces where there were a few thousand users. What is the ideal size of a community to keep it conversational, and what kind of guardrails do you need to put in place to keep the secret from getting out when you do have a good conversational space?
It's a great question. So the ideal community size, I mean, you take the philosophy, there's this concept in sociology called Dunbar's number. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of it, but Dunbar's number, it's a concept that came out from a research in the 70s or 80s, I'm not sure exactly. But there's a magic number, 160, thereabouts, at which a community is able to effectively maintain relationships. And in that research that I quoted, they said it around 200 as the size where you feel like still like a fulfilling participant in a community. So it's around that range, 160 to 200, where you can have like a stable, highly engaged community. Obviously, we have on GroupMe, as they do on Discord, spaces where there are tens to hundreds of thousands of users. Those tend to be more broadcast in nature. But what you'll see happening from those is they'll splinter into smaller, more niche-oriented communities as well, where people can establish those closer ties.
So as a community large, you just need to further silo the sub-communities within it. Is that?
Yeah. That's a good takeaway. If you are a mod for a really big community, you want to take care to like siphon off those smaller spaces. On GroupMe, Discord, there's like the channel mechanism where you could have more topically oriented discussions to help foster that, or you could splinter off entirely separate groups. Multiple strategies. Yes?
So my question is sort of a follow-on to that, which is, where does GroupMe stand on active moderation, moderators of the content?
So,
Because that's where, I mean, you take like Meta, they're just like, well, we're just a utility, right? We don't, we send the electricity out there, we don't know if people are doing bad things with the electricity, right? So that's part of, they absolve themselves of any responsibility, and that accountability is kind of what's driving a lot of the problems, right?
yeah, right.
So I was curious where kind of you guys stand on that.
Yeah, great question. So how do we effectively moderate GroupMe as it's compared to
It doesn't
Facebook?
have to be Microsoft, it could be
Yeah.
volunteers, right?
Right. So we do, as a first principle, we try to give group owners, those administering group chats on GroupMe, effective tools to control who can and can't be in their group, what content can be removed. So giving mod tools to operate via their local context is key. We also have user reporting mechanisms in the app that will surface content to internal Microsoft operation teams to act on. And we do have transparency reports and whatnot that publicly disclose how much content is being moderated and for what reasons. So we do, as GroupMe, snap to the overall Microsoft policies on moderation and trust, and those help us, and those are human operated, they're not AI operated today, so those help us maintain a healthy ecosystem across GroupMe.
And you can't be anonymous on your platform.
Yes, there's no anonymous usage on GroupMe.
That's part of the problem too. People
Right,
hide behind the
right,
anonymous, and then they, can say everything they want.
right. And there's no public feed aspect on GroupMe, that creates a whole other can of worms for Facebook and other feed-oriented platforms where it's really your whole network and follower graph that you have to worry about seeing the content percolating to. Ours are all posts in siloed group contexts. So, yes.
If you had to completely tank GroupMe, ruin it completely, what choices would you make?
If I had to completely tank it.
Yeah, everything that you've been talking about the bad internet, what would you do to GroupMe to achieve that?
Well, I would send a personal invite to every bot on X and Twitter to come join en masse GroupMe groups. I think that would destroy it pretty quickly. Changing the logo to X or Tesla these days might also help squash it. Great question.
To make money is, kind of at the root of
Yeah.
the evil of.
Or paywalling it,
right?
just putting a
It's like,
paywall.
I'm
that would,
a communist. I believe in capitalism, people should be able to make money, but it goes, when it swings too far,
right.
then you start making choices that are all about making the money.
Yeah,
not about
yeah.
the harm you're doing.
Yeah, if the value exchange tilts too far to
Yeah.
Microsoft's internal needs, then that would obviously alienate the community as well. Awesome. Last question.
You touched on the dead internet theory a little bit. So like most content is becoming generative and not by humans. What's been your experience of dealing with AI generated content, and has it caused problems at GroupMe within groups?
Good question. It's something I've been poised to react to, but we haven't fortunately seen it yet en masse. Definitely worried about the coming wave of just AI-generated group members and whatnot. We're not seeing that in force yet. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for everyone for coming and the questions. Really appreciate it.